Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bootcamp. In today's session, we'll start working with GraphQL. And today, Zeeshan is going to be leading the introduction to GraphQL. Zeeshan, over to you.
Sir, do you want to add initially something or?
Yes, I was just wanted to make some comparisons and why is it required. There used to be for web, when we started web, the first technology I used was a Java-based technology, which was called RMI. In that technology, the client and the server were both Java. It was called remote method invocation. When I started my career, at that time, we were using that. Basically, the objective is to how a client talks to a server. Because I was a Java guy, I started my career as a Java guy. So therefore, I started. Then another technology came along, which was. But the problem with RMI was it was very good. It was so good that I loved it. I still love it because it not only allowed to pass data between client and server, but also live object references were passed between from the server to the client, and you can even make calls, remote calls. But there were a number of issues with it. First of all, both on the client and server side, you needed to have Java. After that, people started using Corba, and it seemed at one time that Corba is going to take over anything. When Netscape was in dying days, all the company basically, I had a couple of friends working with Netscape. All the company was focused on building Corba within the Netscape client, Netscape browser. But it was very complicated, Corba, and very difficult to set up. Therefore, it didn't take off. And of course, Netscape was defeated in the battle royal with Microsoft. And anyway, then a lot of people started using web services. And the structure of that web services was basically XML based. And in those XML based web services, basically you can even define your services and so on. Both with RMI, with Corba, and web services, I think the main problem was complication. Then a new technology came along, and somebody wrote a paper called REST, which I always forget what does it stand for. But the point was that basically
It's representational state transfer.
Yeah, something like that. And, anyway, the point was that basically it was extremely simple idea. You could explain someone an idea in 2 minutes, and most of the web developers loved REST, both using get method and post method and two other methods, but mostly people were using get and post, and basically just sending JSON objects back and forth. That was the point. In get, of course, you also what you wanted you. So therefore, in the last few years, most of the API now, if you understand something, on the server side now it is an age of APIs. If you want to create a new web-based company, the first thing you should think about is your APIs. And on the client side also, there's a new movement called Jamstack, which we are going to cover extensively in this bootcamp, which is basically says that you don't need a server. You use different companies' APIs and, of course, your own APIs to use it. And basically, this Jamstack we are going to cover later. Therefore, there's a whole ecosystem of APIs. In this bootcamp for GraphQL, the last thing we'll do is Adil will build a SpaceX app, which they have, of course, it is very popular and it motivates me a lot. But how to develop a SpaceX app by calling the APIs about what are the upcoming launches. Hopefully, in a few years, I'm thinking about buying a ticket to Mars. Are you guys thrill seekers
I'm all
and
in.
willing?
I'm all in. I'm all in.
All in?
All in.
I don't know. It's only a one-way ticket.
It will be a lifetime experience to a one-way. Never mind to be come back.
And anyway, in this world, we are all on a one-way ticket. In the end,
Yeah.
so the point is, now there's no doubt the whole industry, and it makes a lot of sense that whatever services you provide the application programming interface, and in that, and most of you till now have been using, not developing. We have not covered how to develop a REST API, but we have covered how to use a REST-based API by using the fetch method, which we already covered. And you just give a URL, and if it is a post request, you also give a JSON object and get a JSON object back. So that the beauty of REST API is that it's super simple, and anybody can understand it. Even the GET request, or you can call in the browser simply. Just copy the URL and you can see in the browser. Now, the problem with that was, now the thing is, in the last few years, REST has beaten everything. It becomes, you don't worry about what kind of server you have. Any kind of server will build a REST API. And it had one. I thought that it is going to remain a standard for a very long time. But along came Facebook. Facebook was developing their own APIs, Facebook APIs, but the problem was that they were developing apps for the mobile. They were developing native browser-based apps, which we call now PWA. And basically, they were developing native mobile apps and maybe desktop apps. The point is that on the mobile side, the battery life is battery and the energy requirements are very critical. When you are developing applications for desktop, it doesn't matter what data you are transferring. In the REST, the general motto was send everything to the client. Now, if you can make, you have to do two things. For a mobile app, you might have to do two kinds of APIs. One is for the desktops, and one is build two kinds of API, and one is for the mobile. Now, maintaining, all our developers should understand one thing. The best code is which is not required and is not written. Because once you write a code, maintaining code is a very difficult proposition and very difficult to do. Maintenance is a big problem. It costs a lot to maintain the code and update it and remove the bugs and so on. So therefore, what is the best code in the world? The code which is not written. Now, if you're developing two kinds of API, one for the desktop and one for the mobile, it is very difficult to maintain. Second thing is, the mobile one will be, of course, the minimum data being sent on the client, and the desktop will be maybe sent a lot more data. Somebody must have asked this question in Facebook, that why don't we have one API, and somehow from the client, we tell the server that please only send us these fields. It makes sense. If you think about it, somehow from the client, in REST, what you have to do is you have to create, you can also do it, but there was no standard way of doing it. So therefore, they came up with GraphQL, which was an internal Facebook technology. And basically, in the query, you specify which fields you want. It goes to the server, and compared to REST, it does not have a single, in REST, there are multiple endpoints, multiple URLs. In GraphQL, you have a single point. When I started looking up in GraphQL, what I liked the most is the types. Once we go forward, Zeeshan is going to cover it. Why did I propose and all the industry is proposing to use TypeScript? Adil, the reason is that most of the industry understands that type checking helps a lot in compile time checking. And one of the students even asked on our groups that is it the same types, the types of GraphQL, is it the same types as in TypeScript? The objective of these two types are different. In TypeScript, the objective is to check the code at compile time. In GraphQL, the objective is completely different, as my understanding is. The objective is to tell to the clients what will be the structure of the data. So therefore, they are two different things, but the concept is the same. The two objectives are different. And once what it helps is GraphQL documents the complete API very nicely. Looking at the types and the queries and the mutations and the subscriptions that are available, you can immediately figure out, a technical person will immediately figure out what is required, what is possible, and what API calls you can make to the server. The second thing is, once you have this technical information, you can have automated tools which can generate, Zeeshan, the code on the client. This was also a capability of web services.
Yes.
That you could generate your client by WSDL. I don't want to go into it because that technology is mostly not being used anymore. The point is, it is a very simple way of defining the types. It is simple, comparatively simple. Of course, it is much more complicated than REST APIs. But the added complication brings in a lot of added functionality, Daniyal, in my view. Yes. And in my view, especially the documentation. The documentation of the entire API, I just don't have to read a book for the APIs. You just give me a GraphQL entry point, and I can understand what are the different queries that are available. So that is, I'm just giving you so therefore, I love it. If I keep on talking about this, most people will not understand it without looking at the thing, because it is very difficult to tell somebody without that how a camel or an elephant looks like without actually seeing it. So therefore, in the next 2-3 classes, we are going to, this is going to be our standard way of defining things. In Jamstack also, the role of APIs and the role of GraphQL is extensive. So therefore, we are going to spend a lot of time understanding GraphQL, and I think it is the future of APIs. Even now, we have a huge conferences. I think in the next 2-3 days, there's a huge conference, in a few days, a conference happening of GraphQL. The industry has basically adopted it, and basically, I think for simple things, REST will be do, but for professional APIs, the future is GraphQL. Zeeshan, I hand it over to you, and when you are basically coding, I'll ask questions so that students understand it better.
Sure. Okay, so let me first share my screen. Okay, so what we are going to do is, first, initially, we will follow the article Sarzia has mentioned to understand the basic concept of GraphQL, what the tools, what the fields and API and libraries are available to us. And then we will go towards the coding, so we can understand these things are available and how we can use them. So these are the articles. You guys have already seen this. This is the first 4 or 5 articles which I have already opened them over here. The important thing is what they mentioned about GraphQL is a new API standard and a flexible alternative to REST. What REST was doing is basically, as Sergey has mentioned, you have a URL and you call API from the client and you send request to a particular URL. If you have a 2, 3, or 4 APIs, So you need to send them requests separately on each API and fetch data from them. In GraphQL, the good thing is, if you when you mention the APIs, you can call all these information in one query instead of sending multiple requests. Plus, there is a very good thing about GraphQL is it standardizes the implementation of query language. You don't have to worry about the framework you are using. You don't have to worry about the language. Either you are working with JavaScript, Java, C Sharp, or any type of language you are working in. You will be specifying the query language code in a standard way, which is defined initially. So GraphQL mainly defined how you should request the data, how you should define that, how data should be available. This is the main power of the GraphQL. And there are other benefit, as Sarja also mentioned, that if we are working with the desktop or mobile app, so we don't need to specify the separate APIs. We can customize from the client side that how many fields or how much data I need from the server. So from the client side, if you are working with the mobile, you need less amount of data and you need specific data. Again, as I mentioned, verifying different platforms, and so GraphQL stays the same instead of working I'll show you the example of REST API also, how it works from the client and server, and it increase the initial development or initial coding time requires the time. If you understand it once, it will be a smooth and fast. It was introduced in 2012 by uh, Facebook. Okay. The important thing is in GraphQL is the schema definition language which GraphQL has prepared. The main just or main important thing, the central idea, the backbone of GraphQL is the schema definition language, which is actually facilitate everything. If anybody knows about it, that's good. If anybody don't know about it, that's not a problem. If you remember, or if anybody knows, SQL databases. In SQL databases, we have a standard. There was a cons of those language, but we have a standard how we query the data. Select static from, let's say, users, where name equals to Isha. This is the query in case of SQL languages. And the good thing was, either you are working with Java, either you are working with C Sharp, either you are working with JavaScript on server. This SQL works with this server, and either any kind of language. The query typing of query, how you write a query is same in whatever language you are working with, whatever framework you are working. So GraphQL touches the that thing also with additional benefit. What that is, SQL, another thing. If you are working with MySQL database, you are working with MS SQL database, you are working with Oracle, what any kind of database you are working, query language will remain the same. GraphQL has the same capability. On the server side, you will be writing types, a query, a mutation. We'll see what these are. They will remain the same, whatever language you are working with. And interestingly, it also writes in a what you say, a template string. So that's also a kind of a string which were like SQL previously. So on the server side, it's the benefit of it, with whatever type of language you are using, you will type a standard type of queries. And from the client side, this is the additional benefit of GraphQL, that from the client side you can specify same kind of information, so that client can specifically require from the server. So on the client and server, you type a query language which remains the same, whatever language or whatever technology you are using. So that's the benefit and the schema language. So you can specify if you see.
I will
uh,
just like to, Zishan, just like to add something here.
yes.
Some people might be confused whether it's a database query language. It is not a GraphQL is not a database query language, but some people it is changing also. The database which is becoming, which we are going to use in this bootcamp as FunaDB, and the other one is MongoDB. In FunaDB and MongoDB, they are both moving towards providing interface GraphQL interfaces for the databases. So therefore, this was designed for the APIs, but usually you will see that people will say it's not a database query language, which is true, but as it's changing, that people have started using it even to query databases.
Yes, basically, the beauty that's the beauty of GraphQL, because it works as an API from the client and server point of view. And in the past, we had the what you say APIs for to connect database directly. So uh, you will be writing GraphQL queries. You will be specifying the types so that client can interact with server using the GraphQL, and the GraphQL will talk to the database or other API or anything. The interface will be standardized so that you don't need to worry about how the database will work or everything. But so it's not in as Sarja mentioned, it's not in database query language, but sometimes the what you say line will be so thin that you might confuse that it's not a database, because the query databases will provide directly interfaces for them. So here's the first example. As we are specifying type from the server perspective, whenever client requests something, client used to specify in REST API. We just call the REST API and client use some JSON format. We don't know what the data will be. There is no specifically typing, so there can be four properties in past. In future, there can be a five properties and six properties, and that will always be confusing. That what actual data will be returned. In GraphQL, you will specify the type from the server and you will specify type data from the client. So you will always know what the data will be coming to the client. So this is how you will specify a types, so that you are creating a person type in a GraphQL, and a client will ask for the type person, and the server will do some processing, which we'll discuss later, and return this. Like again, it's a post. So important thing is, from the server perspective, you will define types first, as we have did in TypeScript. It's conceptually it's the same, that we are defining a type. So it's a person type. It has a name property, which is a string. This exclamatory mark shows that this property is required, that you must need to provide it. Age, int, post. It's an array of post. So this is we have this post property. Okay, so how you are going to query the data? This is the data. This is the type that will be specified by the server, and this is how you are going to fetch the data. We'll see in detail, but on the face of it, this is coming from the client side, and this will be on the server. Okay, now as you can see, you are specifying all person, curly brackets, name, age, post, and title. So what you are saying is, I need all the persons and their name and age properties. So person have name and age property, and it also has posts. So we are specifying post also. In post, interesting thing is we have two properties, title and author. But what client is doing is, client is asking only for the title. So in this case, from the client, when server receive the request for this information, server will return post, array of post, but only with title. It will not return with author. So that's the benefit, and you can provide the argument into that. There are a few things which we, once we start working, then we will be better understand.
And when I was reading this article, I also got confused. We will have to go downstairs to the bottom of the article, and in that they are specifying what a query is, because some people
Yes,
might get the wrong idea that all persons is some kind of keyword. It's not.
it's not. It's a variable or a kind of a property.
Uh-huh.
So here it is. Here it is. So in GraphQL, when you want to specify that what kind of data customer can ask or client can ask, so you can specify three type of queries. One is type query. So you, if you need to fetch data, what kind of data you need to retrieve from the server, you will specify in this query. If you want to add or update data, you will work with mutation. And if you want to create a live stream, or you, what you say, like for what we need to do, a
Real-time
socket,
connections.
so that it should connect, yeah, live data, so it should stay connected and you get receive live response or live update from the server, so you can use this subscription. Now the good thing is, in REST APIs, you do not have a live connections. You just call the HTTP API. If you need to need live connection kind of sockets, so you need to do it separately. GraphQL also combines both. Now the type and the query. So here it is. You write type query curly bracket and you type the keyword. All
Zishan,
person.
is query a keyword? Can I?
Yes, yes, it's a keyword.
So therefore, the root of all queries must be defined in the type query.
Yes, so or whatever you need to fetch, you require that client would be asking, or the, it's kind of a it's kind of an API. You are creating an API with the name all person. So that's when client will be asking from the server, client will say all person. I require all person. So
Given this data, can I query all posts?
if server has specified only this, you cannot query all post, because
Okay.
what you need to do is, you need to, if you are using on server like this, or let me say person colon, I'm simplifying it so that person, and there is a type person, and as you have mentioned about the post, so I'm stating the post over here just to show you. Now this type query asking, saying only person is available. So client can request only for the person, and how client will do that? This is the server code. I'm just creating separate notepad. So to, on the client side, what you will do is, you will call person like this, and you will mention that I need name. So this is the query. It is a person. You are specifying that person over here, and you are saying I need only name. So what it will do is, there is other code also which we have not seen, resolver and everything. But what client server will do is, server will return a person, but only return the name. If you try to ask the post, it will not be available to the response, because the query has not defined it. So if you want it, what you will do is you will create a post and then mention post only. So the good thing is you are creating multiple APIs with the single interface. So there can be, as we'll see in later, that for each information, each property, the person and the post, we will have a one function. We will have a function which will be asking, which will be returning information. We'll see the resolvers in a moment so that we will understand how it will work. So this is the basic information which you need to understand. The server specifies types and queries, and client specifies what type of information I'll be querying.
Okay, what is these argument things?
Argument basically, the problem is uh, with the REST API, what we can do is we can specify the person ID, that I need a person with that particular ID. But in case of this typing, at this moment, we cannot see that I can ask for a person with a specific ID. So that's why that's where it comes the argument. Let me go back over here. Mhm. Yes, last column 2. So we are specifying a property last and we are providing the value 2, and this can be specified as dynamic. So what you can do is, let's say I'll specify id colon string. So what I'm saying is, whenever customer is calling my person object, and by the way, this exactly signature will goes for our function which server will implement. So now what client will do is client will specify id equals to 23. So server will receive this information, and server will the function of a server which will see call for the person information and provide this information 23 into the what you say argument. What you need to understand is this is kind of a function. So you are specifying actually a function so that customer client can call it. So this is how argument will work. And if whenever you need to create add data or something, so what you can do is that, as we have discussed, top level properties, which are query, mutation, and subscription. So to fetching data, you will specify queries. To update data, you will specify mutations. So what you can do is you can say type mutation. So it specifies that whenever something coming for this, that means it is to update or add data on the server. So you will create mutation like this, and you will specify it in a way that this function has been specified. That it's actually client side data. We need to see the server side.
I think it was below.
Okay.
Mutation.
Yes, that's. So what you can do is, in this case, you can specify that I want. So basically, client will be, in this case, calling a function name create person, and you are saying that this requires a name property, and exclamatory sign means it's a required property. It's not an optional property. You can create optional property as well. And what you are saying that it's type person, so that means it will return a person object. So this is a mutation from the server side, that you are creating a type, and client will query it in this way. So what client will do now, the thing is, you can specify here query as well. So you can understand that this is a query and this is a mutation. It is when you are specifying client side, we will see a moment later how these things work. So what you will do is you will call a create. By the way, this all will be a template string. So it will be inside a template string. I'll show you. So name is Alice. That means we are creating an
I don't
and
understand, Zeeshan. Why
yes.
Alice Acho? I thought you know somebody by name of Alice.
No, it was written over here. Good, Sammy. Now, what you need to understand that what it is doing is after specifying create person, it uses curly bracket and ID. What it is saying is the whatever object this create person will return, I need only ID property from it. So in our case, as we have mentioned over here, we are returning a person object, a type of person. And as we have seen above, person has name, age, and ID if we specify. So what we are saying that only return ID properties. So it can be customized from the client side that what I wanted to see in response. What I can do is I can say name, I can say ID, whatever properties you require. So you can specify these
I think
properties.
in the example they were saying that the name is not very useful because we have already sent a name. So
Yeah,
therefore, it
we
will just return the
send,
name.
yes.
Most of the APIs, GraphQL basically create IDs for the
Hmm.
objects. So
So you
therefore,
can,
you can get back the ID.
yes. So that's how you specify. And also there is a subscription. So in case of subscription, this is how you create a subscription. Again, I don't need to type it separately. You type subscription, new person. This is the keyword you will ask for and the person. And whenever it's being updated from the client, as you can see here.
Updated from any other client. It will be
And
basically
yes. So from the client side, you will call it like this, subscription person name. What it will do is it will create a constant connection with the server. And whenever you will receive new person, you will your client will receive it directly, and you can use that information to update your client.
The chat example application is one of the best example for real-time data.
Okay. Yes. 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 Okay. So now you can see all this information in single here. Type query all person. You are requiring only all person. You are creating person. So you are mutating new subscription, and you are specifying type of a person so that you can specify person over here as well, and over here. So you don't need to repeat this property. So you specify the type and post. And as you can see, we have post over here, but this post is not specified separately in query, but it is inside a person. So if we receive full person, we specify post, so we'll receive post as well.
Ishan, I just want to emphasize at this point that this is defined on the server, not on the client. We just query
Yeah,
from the client.
this will be the on server, and this part will be on the client.
Because we have not yet learned how to create servers. So
Yes.
therefore, we are not going to go in detail how to develop servers on at this stage. Later on,
Yes.
we are going to use serverless servers, GraphQL servers, learn how to develop Lambda functions and how to later on. But at this stage of the bootcamp, we are only going to focus more on the client. But unless you understand the server, you cannot define the client. That is the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. So we need to a bit of touch So how it will be specified on the server, so you need to see it, otherwise you can do it directly.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so it is talking about the big picture, three use cases. Let me just specify and summarize it in a way that what you can do is you can create a GraphQL server which will directly talk to the database. So you will have a server, a Node.js server, or any language server with any language, and that GraphQL code will talk to the database directly whenever you are creating a new project. If you have a legacy system, so what you can do, the second option is talking about that you can even talk to the APIs. So your GraphQL code, as Sarja previously mentioned, that it is not a database query language. So it's in a query language, so the client can talk to it, and it can talk to the database or any other API or anything you want to talk to. Talk to. So that's how it's beneficial. And there is a hybrid approach. You can specify partially to the database or partially to the API server. So it works with all the cases. So GraphQL is quite flexible in this case. I think before moving to these detailed types, I should have a small example. What you say?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So let me first show you how we create REST API server. I'll just show you the code directly so that you see how it works. And then we'll build a small GraphQL code based on that very same example. Okay, so uh, we have not learned servers yet, but I'm just showing you that if a REST API is being built, or uh, you want to create, you can use Node.js and Express server. So it's a simple code. Forget about this access control. App slash get, it will show the string message, and if you get the slash user, so it will return you JSON object. It's just a simple code you can see. So it's in a server. Whenever client request to localhost colon whatever the port is slash user, so it will return this JSON object. Let me start this server. So I just started this server. It's running on 3000 port, and what it does is on the slash on the root, it returns the hello from Node.js API. Now what I can do is I can call the slash user. So name, Zeeshan, email. This is the JSON object we have received from the server. Now what we can do on the client, which we have already learned quite well, how to call the API. So we have seen previously that with use effect and use state, we can call state APIs. So as you can see, user, set user, use state, I have created this object. Now, use effect, await fetch response. We have seen this in detail in our class number 5 or 6. So everybody knows it. Set user data, its user data will be set, and you will see the name and age over here, as you can see. Yeah, so this is the server and this is the client. So what I'll do is I'll create same uh, information, but with the GraphQL code. So we will see the flavor of server, a bit of server flavor, and then client flavor as well. For that, what you can do is again go to the article Sarzia has specified. There is a server code for Apollo. It mentioned how you can build the server. So I have opened this already. And there is a client code introduction to Apollo Client 3 React. So Apollo has provided code specifying library for the server as well as client. So you will specify the client with the Apollo. Apollo is a library which helps to specify the what you say GraphQL, so that you can develop your server and client with the Apollo. So in case of Apollo, what I'll do is getting started. Directly go to the getting started, and what you can see, what you will do is install GraphQL. Now again, because installation took time, so what I did is I created the server app. I just installed it. There is nothing. I just made the installations. There is no code here, as you can see. Just the installation of Apollo GraphQL, which is mentioned over here. So you will. I'm on React server. I was on wrong place. Okay, so in case of server, as we have seen, you can specify type. You can. This is the code to set up a Apollo server. So what I'll do is I'll specify index.js or app.js, whatever I want. And I'll pick this code. What it says is you need to install Apollo server. So it's just a simple command npm install Apollo server, and it will install the Apollo server. What it says is fetch the Apollo server. Type definition. This is where we will specify our types. So we will create a separate file schema and we'll define all types over there. And then we specify the types inside the Apollo server. And what the type specification will be. So as you can see, schema.js. Apollo server provide GraphQL. It's again, we'll discuss later, a tag function. So you can create you can call a function without specifying round bracket, and it will be a template string kind of thing. So a GQL is actually a function. So what you can do is you can call const GQL Apollo, and then you specify types. So let me create schema.js. By the way, we are working on the server. So it's a simple server. That's why I'm specifying code over here to show you guys. Okay, so GraphQL Apollo server, and this is the portion where we'll specify. What I'll do is I'll try to replicate this same server so that it returns me an user. So what I'll do is I'll create, first of all, type user. I'll mention name, string. I'll mention we have email. Okay. So we can use email or age. So let me specify age. So we can use different data type. User and type query. And what I'll say is user colon user. Now, this is the simple code of specifying types on server in schema. So you call the GQL. GQL is a function. In that you provide the template string. I'll discuss the tag function later. And then whatever we discuss a moment before here, just this, all these things we have discussed will be provided inside this GQL. template string. So all whatever you are require. Let's say you also want type um, course. So name, course ID. So you are specifying another property, and you can say course colon course. That's how you specify, so that you are saying that you will have a user and a course. These types has been defined, and type def has been exported over here. So when Apollo requires these types, so this type has been provided to the Apollo server. What will be our next step? Our next step will be, after specifying schema and the special server, what we can do is, as you can see in this example as well, it's creating types in schema and then specifying query launches launch user. Also it has a mutation, so I'm not going over there at this moment. Okay, so to run your server, what you need to do is Apollo schema type definition and server.listen. What it will do is it will run a server, but it will not work because we do not have a resolver at this moment. So I just copy. There are small changes, so I'll need to. So what you are doing, creating, requiring Apollo server, requiring schema type definition, creating a new object of Apollo server, and then this on this server.listen dot, then it will give you the URL, so you can see what on what URL your server is working. Okay, so node app.js, it's working on localhost 4000, so let me run it. Good thing is Apollo, with Apollo you are working, it will give you the playground to call what you say your data. So as we have discussed in this, that if you are asking for the person or a post, so you can specify this person like this way. So we can test our API, our query here. What I'll do is I'll test it over here, that I need user and I need name and age. It is working fine, but it is returning null because we have not specified how it will fetch the data. So at this moment, our code is working fine. Now what we need to do is we need to I am skipping data source. We need to add resolvers. What resolvers do is actually the function which works the logic on the server, which returns the data. So this is what we have. That's how you no. It's something like that. So let me type it over here so that you guys understand. Const resolvers equals, this is how you specify, and then you say query, and inside the query. Now what you are saying, we need to send uh, user, so we will specify user colon, and it's a function. Here will be a logic to call the database, to call the another API or whatever. So at this moment I am returning a static object because we do not have any database over here right at this moment. So I'll say Zeeshan age will be definitely 21. Okay, so this is the resolver we have created, and we'll pass this resolver over here. Now we'll restart the server. Refresh the background. Refreshing is not required. So now you can see it's returning name and Zeeshan. So our server is ready to serve to the client. Now that we can create a client which will access all these information so that it can call the data from the server. Okay, so let's go to the client. Again, for the client, what I did is I created the code uh, application before, so that we don't need to worry about installations. So you just need to create React app, and then you can install Apollo client. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so hello world from, let me start the server so that if we have another client running, let me stop that. So now this is our server which we have discussed in detail. We have a client with us. We can run yes. So, and for the client, what you can do is, as I mentioned in create in the article, Sazia has given the specific links to for this, so you can go over there. What it says is npm install Apollo client and GraphQL. I have already installed them, so they are already in my project. I have, you can just run this same command so that you don't have to we don't have to waste time in this class. So yes, I have already installed GraphQL and Apollo client. Now what I can do is check this out. Apollo client, and it asks for the client and the actual connection. In memory cache we are not talking about, but let's it there, it's be there. URI, here you specify the URI from which server you want to talk, and that should be a Apollo server or a GraphQL server, so that your client can talk to the server directly. So let me just copy this instead of typing. It's already available to us. Okay, so Apollo client in memory cache from Apollo slash client, and you can create instance of Apollo client, and now the URI will be our server's URI. So our server is on localhost colon 4000. So what I'll do is http colon slash slash localhost colon 4000. Now there is another thing. We have discussed the context API, and in context API we have discussed the providers. So this is the same exact provider Apollo has also provided, so that what you can do is you can create at the global level context, so that all the component inside the provider have access to the client object, so that it can, all the component within component itself can call the queries and do whatever they want to do. So what I'll do is Apollo provider. Apollo provider, And inside that, what you need to see is send is as we have remembered in context API, we have a value of property. Here we have it requires clients. So this client will be provided here. So that all the component at this moment we do not have too much of component. We can create them, but at this moment we are not doing that. So we can call this client over like this. Next, what we can do is now we need to request the data from the server. This is how you again use query hook available to us, and this is how you create a query language to contact to the server. And then you specify another good thing. If you are working with the fetch API for the loading, for the error, all these things for you need to specify separate properties. GraphQL provides, or it's an Apollo library. It provides you directly a property loading. So if your data is being loading, it will remain the false true. If it is an error, you will receive the error, and in data property, you will receive the data. So it's quite all these things done directly in what you need to do is you need to call use query and provide the exchange rate, and this is how it will work. So what I'll do is let me create a component so that we stay so that we understand that it will work in a separate component as well. I'm just copying over there, and I'll remove non-relevant items. User only provider. We have created the user component, and we'll use this user component inside the app. So let me specify that user component here. We can see on the client side, it's mentioning GraphQL and user. Now what we can show, one thing we have specified Apollo client, provider, clients, everything in the app. And the user, what we need to do, we need to do two things. First, we need to specify the query, that how you need to call the server or what API you need to call from the server. And second, you need to use the hook, use query hook, in which we will specify the query you want to call, and then you will whatever logic you need to use to display your component. So what we'll do is we'll create funds get user equals to GQL. So it's not a GraphQL, so I'll go to directly before GQL. Apollo client, and I'll type template string. It's a tilde sign near the one. Yeah. Now what I need to specify, as we have learned, I need to specify this kind of query so that I can say that what I am requiring, what I need from the server. So to understand this, let us go back to the here. What it's saying, it's specifying the name of the query, so we can ignore it for a while. It's a named query, so you can skip this portion, but you can specify or not. That's the important thing is this curly bracket, and in this curly bracket you specify the property you are asking for, the code you have, API you have written. So you have written what you have written. You have written user. So what I'll do is I'll say query, and I'll say user column, and I'll ask for the name only. That's how I'll specify the query. And now what I'll do is const loading, comma, error, comma, data should be curly bracket. Yes, because it's returning an object equals to use query. And in this use query, I'll specify we are working on the client side. We noted. So we have specified the query and this. Now what we can do, the good thing is we have loading properties, so we can customize our code so that if still loading, so what we can do is we can return if it's error. In fetch, you have to do all these things yourself to specify and then mention this. So REST API, there is another benefit of it. Now, here, what I can do is I can specify, I will say name, column, and in curly bracket, we have a data. And what we are receiving actually, we are receiving a user object. So in data.user.name. Curly bracket. Curly bracket found. Expected name column found. Okay. So now you can see name colon Zeeshan. So let me just stringify it so that you can see that what data is coming from the server. So I'm stringifying the complete object so that you can understand what we are receiving from the server. We can see in console as well, but let me specify in UI. So you are receiving an object from the server. So in data, we have an object. Inside that object, we have a user property. There's a type name, you can specify the type user, and there's a name property. We have not received the age property. So what I can do is I can go to the user and I can say age as well. So I'll start receiving name and age both. So what I can do is let me go for the so name and age. If I'll remove the age again, it will call only name. So that's how you can. This is a very simple example. We can customize and add many other things to this. This is one of the simple example, and there is a lot of other things we can do. At this moment, we have only seen what you can do with the query. So this is the query user course, and if you want to call the course, at this moment we have not specified the resolver for that. So each query you specify represents a function in a resolver, so that whenever queries come in for particular user, it go for the that particular function. And the important thing is it will return only At this moment, I'm returning both, but the server, Apollo server and the GraphQL, what it will do is it will return only information which is required. So it's a huge benefit where you need to reduce the data baggage from the on the client. So that's in a simple example. If you guys have any questions, so that
Zeeshan,
uh,
just we have a few minutes left in the class. Just
mhm.
revise both the client code and the server code, and we are done with the class.
Okay, so let me revise it. So what we did is important thing is we need to understand that GraphQL provides the query language to contact the server, so that client can contact the server within the specified terms and specified values. In case of REST APIs, what we had to do is we had to call the API, and whatever data is coming from the server, we have to use data. If some data is not relevant to us, we need to ignore that data, but the bandwidth will be consumed, either you are working on the desktop or the mobile. So what GraphQL do is it helps you, it gives you feature so that you can call data whatever you want, instead of doing separate calls for and multiple calls. Instead of calling multiple APIs separately, you can call those APIs in a single go. As I mentioned over here, this is the one API. So if I need to specify, just a moment, so that I'll, for the course, what I need to do is I need to create a course. And if I need to call both these API, I need to call to fetch. In GraphQL, the benefit is I have created a user type, I have created the course type, and I have created the query which says user and the course. This is the type definition I have done on the client. So this is the graph. So what we'll do is install Apollo server, import that Apollo server, define the schema. That schema will be inside a tag function. We have not discussed the tag function, but Sarja has mentioned those in those article. Maybe we can discuss in next class. So GQL and a template string. So it will always be a GQL is a function you must remember, and you will write type definition inside that template string. So we have specified user type, course, and the query, and export this type definition. We required that type definition. We created the server, Apollo server, and specified those type definition, and then start listening to the client request. Now, for each query or each mutation, which we'll see in the next class or so, for each mutation you need to provide resolver. So in case of query, we have a specified query. If there will be a mutation, what we'll do is we'll provide mutation colon curly bracket, and we'll type provide the function just like them, so that it will work for the mutation, so that client adds request to update something. So in user, we are providing a function, and this function, this code over here is your world. You can contact to the database, any API or anything else. We are providing the static data, and that's it. This is our simple server. On the client side, what we can do is we can create a client side application, install Apollo client and GraphQL. And then what we can do is the first thing is what we need is to contact the GraphQL server. So what you'll do is you specify create a Apollo client, and you specify what this client will, which URL this client will talk to. Cache we have not discussed it, so ignore it for the moment. So if the benefit of cache is you can cache your API, so that if the same data is being fetched, so it will just return from the cache instead of calling the API again and again. Okay. So the client, and what you can do is we have learned the context API to provide Apollo provider, so that all the component inside your this provider have access, as we have used user separately, so it can access these information. Otherwise it will not, these information will not be available, because client is here. So all these components require the client object, so that they can contact to the server. So Apollo client, and you specify the component, you provide the client this client property over here. And inside the user component, what we did is now again we specify schema in template string, and then we specify resolver in JavaScript, so that what will be that template is uh, function for that template string. In client, we specify the query in template string in a tag function, because GQL is a function, and we are calling the query. We are saying we need to call the user query API, you can say, and we need only name property from it. That's what we have mentioned. Or you can provide another
Yeah.
property. Yes, you're saying something? Okay. You were saying something?
No, 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 no.
Okay. So the good thing is, as I mentioned over here, that if we have a two API, user and course, so we need to send two calls. In our case, what we can do is we can mention course like this. So it will be a single call to the server, and it will fetch both the APIs. That's the benefit both of GraphQL. Again, it's better than REST feature. So at this moment, I'm removing it. Now, this is our world, which we have learning from the class one for the React. We have used use query hook, and we have mentioned this query. We have provided this query over here. It returns an object. That object has many other things. Will you can see the. I'll show you in a moment. So it instead of these three, there are all other properties. The good thing is you can check network status as well. There is a property network status. So if your network is not working, you can test that as well. You need to do in normal application, you need to do separate implementation for that as well. So if your data is being loading, it will return the true. If there is an error, you will receive error. If you receive a concrete data, that will be inside the data property. So in case of loading, what I'm doing is at this moment showing that loading. So our server is fast enough at this moment, so it does not appear to us. There's no error, so if we don't face any error. And in case of calling the data, because we have a data and we receive uh, user object, so you can mention data.user.net, and you have the data available to us in just a moment. Famous server is there. Yes. So you can see this data over here. I guess that's it. I just need to mention a point in article where you can see all the uh, yes. You can see what this query object use query component returns to you. So there are a lot more properties, and you can play with them here. Query, variables, poll interval, fetch policy, error policy. There are a lot of, and you have complete explanation. So you can see them and verify how they works. Okay. So I'm done over here.
I think we are done with the class. Done about a few minutes over it. Next time, Daniyal will take over, and we'll move forward. And then Adil will develop a SpaceX app for us, which maybe he will receive a present from a SpaceX CEO of a few $1 million. You never know.
We'll contact the Ellen after that.
That's the problem. If you have a rich friend, people are always looking out for a handout. And
Yeah.
but we want to tell our students that there are no free lunches in life. You have to earn it.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Bye bye. See you
Thank you
guys
so much.
around.
Thank you
Thank you.
guys. Bye. See you later.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.